Good morning, good evening, everyone. Hopefully, we are audible. So thank you for joining us today. And what we wanted to do today was, as the interview season starts, 15 September, hopefully you're all ready to submit in your application. So we wanted to discuss the other important phase, which is the interview preparation. And we have our panel here, and we'll be discussing some of the important strategies for the interviews, some of the questions, and how the programs assess you. What is the importance of the interview? So all these questions we would want to discuss. Before we start, I'd like to take this opportunity for those of you who don't know us, who we are and what we do. But let me go over the virtual room and make some introduction. So my name is Pawan Khera. I'm a faculty at Carnegie Mellon. I teach healthcare analytics and I've been teaching it for about 10 to 12 years. All right, let me go around. So Rahul.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rahul Panana. I'm a gastroenterologist, and been doing this for about 3-4 years now, and I think we've tried to help a lot of people in sort of similar situation who are looking to get to a match. So hopefully that we can do the same for you. Shelda?
Sure. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible. Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Shailaja. I am currently a PGY2 in internal medicine in University of Nevada, Reno. I actually joined the panel a couple of years ago, and I'm looking forward to help you guys.
Thank you, Sharon. Chinta?
Hey guys, my name is Chinta Shah. I'm one of the first-year residents at University of Arkansas in internal medicine. I was in your shoes last year, so I know every one of you here is like pretty much nervous to see how the interview season pan out. But I hope with this thing, what we're doing today kind of gives you an idea what to expect when you go into an interview.
Thank you, Chinta. All right, so for those of you who don't know us, we actually help in multiple phases of your USMLE journey, so including your application, personal statement, program selection, and of course the interview preparation, so which we have already started. So we'll talk more about that. But just to give you a sense of what we do it through classes. We have physician mentors, some of whom you see on the panel today, and then we have a WhatsApp community, very close knit community of our students. So there are multiple ways by which we do this one-on-one mock interviews as well. And look up our website, you will see our panel, which includes both former IMGs, attendings, residents, AMGs, and of course the US journalists. For the PSCV interview prep kind of help. And we've been fairly successful. I mean, we have a match rate of over 87%. In the last 3 or 4 years, we have helped about 400 students from over 22 countries. The entire list is available on our website. You can look up the programs where our students have matched. This is all on the website, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but it includes both the university programs, community programs, affiliate programs, and multiple specialties, all specialties, IMP, neuro, psych, you name it, surgery, prelim surgery, etc. So with that, I want to jump right into the meat of the presentation today, which is the importance of the interview. I mean, what is the interview and why is this important? So I think, Rahul, you were to take it on from there.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So, wonderful. So, we just wanted to spend a few minutes kind of going over, before we go to this graph, I'm just going to go back, spend a few minutes of why the interview is important and how it makes or breaks whether you match and, whether you secure the match. Now, as you know, obviously you go through this whole process. It's important to sort of step back and think why that 20 minutes is so important. You've spent all your time going through medical school, you've done, you've worked very hard, you've gotten the scores, you've gotten everything, you've gotten your USMLE exams. But what all that does is really buys you a seat at the table, in my mind. It buys you a seat at the table depending on your scores, depending on what you've done. And, where that seat is really depends on where you stand in the, which medical school you went to, how, all your other things. But let's say you're going to program X, that program X, everybody who's going to interview there at that program X is going to be pretty much in the same sort of, category as you are, whatever that category is, within one or two, maybe one standard deviation. That's the way to think about it, is to say, okay, I've got an interview at this place. Everybody who's going to interview, let's say there are 8 or 9 people who are going to interview on that day, they're going to be pretty much the same, if not better than me. What is it that I'm going to do that the program director is going to make, or the program is going to pick me over those other 8 people, right? So the make or break thing there is how you perform, how you interact, and what you do, what you say on the interview. Because if you put yourself in their shoes, they're using 20 minutes or whatever time they have with you to make a decision of A, will you fit into their program? B, will you have the adequate credentials and everything to be successful in that program? Are you going to represent the program successfully? And more importantly, can they spend 3 years working with you, right? They're going to be your attendings. They're going to be, responsible for you. They're going to be the ones answering the phone when you call them at 3 a.m. with an admission, right? So they want to know, can they depend on you? Can they do that for 3 years? So that's sort of what the interview, those 20 minutes, how that's so important. So, not surprisingly, when you look at data from the NRMP, this is a busy graph, but if you just focus on the top 2 or 3 things, this is the percentage of programs citing each factor and the importance of each factor in ranking applicants. So if you just look at this, the vast majority, about 94, 95%, if you look at the first 3 things, these are interactions during your interview. It's interactions with the faculty, interpersonal skills, and interactions with the house staff, and feedback from the residents, which again reflects the interactions that you've had with the house staff or with everybody else. Then comes your score. So the top 4 criteria that determine your rank or ranking is your interaction. Like I said, this reinforces the point that at a program, at a certain program, you could be at a university level, whatever that program, everybody there who's going to come in is going to be of a similar sort of academic credentials. So you're going to have to use that 20 minutes of your interview to really reinforce these top 4 things. Now, especially as I assume most of you are, or if not all of you, are foreign graduates or international graduates, but it really doesn't matter. If you look at an average program, it has about 14 positions in the match. They get a whole boatload of applicants, right? So, excuse me. So you see this steep drop-off here. It goes from about 2,200 to about 1/10 who are granted interviews, and it really goes to about 149 who are actually ranked. So what determines, this drop-off is from scores and credentials and things like that, but really, of the 149, they're only going to rank, the top 15 or top, if there are 14 positions, you've got to be in the top 20 or so to rank it, to really have a good chance of matching. So you see the substantial drop here, And that drop really is determined by your performance. Now, we've noticed this, and this may be less important for interviews, but as you apply in general, you know, about only 61% are completely rejected based on some kind of a screening process, whether it be year of graduation, scores, whatever it is, visas, things like that. And only about 30% of applications get an in-depth review. So be very mindful, just to sort of diverge away from the interview thing, but as you put in your applications, make sure your application, the ERAS application that you put in is of the highest quality. Yeah, the lower part of the slide is not visible. I see the thing, but I'll try my best to explain what these are, okay? But the point going back to it is when you put in an application, your personal statement, make it the absolute best that you can make it to be, okay? So that's sort of what I wanted to say. I think the biggest thing I would say from a takeaway point of view is your perspective on interviews. I want you know, people think about interviews, and some people get it, some people don't in terms of the importance to give it for interviews. But what I would sort of, after, you know, looking at this, and, you know, we interview a lot of people, you would be surprised at the, you know, the discordance many times between the application that one sees and what one expects when somebody is going to walk into the room, and what you actually make an assessment of when they leave the room. So your goal is to be 10 times better than your application, okay? Your goal is to be 10 times better than an application, so that when you leave the room, the person interviewing you should say, wow, the application really doesn't do justice to this person's personality. So that sort of is the goal going into the interviews, okay? I want you to sort of think in that framework. So let me stop there. I'll hand over back to Pavan so that he can kind of go over it. Or
yeah, so I know one of our other panelists, Sridevi Rajiv, has joined. Sridevi, can you hear us?
Hi, Pavan, can you hear me?
Yes, I think your video is not on, but yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
So why don't you do a quick intro and then we move on?
Okay, can you see my video now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sridevi Rajiv. I'm a second-year resident at Mount Sinai St. Louis Roosevelt Hospital in internal medicine, and I'm really glad to be joining this board to help you guys through and answer questions. And I've been through this platform many times before, and it's helped me a lot.
Thank you. So I do want to bring in Shailaja and Sridevi, both of you. You know, how do programs, now you've been through this and now you're on the other side. So how do programs in general select candidates for interview? What do they look for, you know, qualitative skills, quantitative skills, whatever these are? So Shailaja, starting with you, what have you observed? What do programs look for as they are selecting the applicants?
Sure. So let me take a minute to actually talk to you about what you have done so far is working through your books, working through UWorld, and trying to get the best score possible. Now, obviously, your scores matter a lot when it comes to the programs actually calling you for interviews. And I think your step one, particularly because the U.S. medical graduates actually don't do their CK before they send in their applications. So most programs look at your step one score, and that's very, very important that you get a good score in step one. Now, that doesn't mean that the application will be turned down if you didn't, as long as you actually do well in several other aspects that the programs are looking for. But certainly your step 1 and for IMGs, your CK and CS do matter, which means that, you've got to be ECFMG certified. There are rare exceptions where I've heard a couple of people getting an interview invite without their CS or CK, but, take it for granted. That's very, very rare. Unless you've been in that same program, worked with those people there for a couple of years or so and made a really, really good impression, that's, a very rare exception. So you've got to do your best to get a good score on step 1, CK and CS and be ECFMG certified when you send that application out. Now, the other thing that programs do look for is your LORs. Now, most people might actually get an okay or an average LOR if you do a 2-week elective, if you know people and you're, just going and doing an elective there for a couple of weeks, shadowing them for the sake of getting one. But actually, when you are working with someone as an observer or as an extern, or you're doing your elective during med school, make sure that you put in the best of your effort to get an excellent LOR. Particularly if you're working with renowned people who are, very well known either regionally or nationally in a particular field, and that really counts a lot. And even if you don't, if not everyone is fortunate to have such big opportunities, but even if you do work in a small community program, show your interest, make the best of that opportunity so that you get an excellent LOR, to the extent that actually some of the program faculty might call on your behalf to actually fetch you an interview. Now, following that, your personal statement does count. Don't take it easy and light. Presumably all of you would have done most of the work on your personal statement by now. It's a process. It's going to take at least a month or 2 to get a good personal statement ready to send out for your application. So if you have not started, it's high time that you actually put your pen down to paper or put your thoughts on your Word document or whatever and get it going. Now, in addition to these, Pavan, I think, actually has the NRMP statistics. So
yeah, let me pull this for you.
Sure. So
yeah, let me make it a bit wider. Yeah, go ahead.
So after each and every interview season, program directors get actually interviewed by an RMP. They rather not interviewed, they actually get to do a survey on what they think are the biggest factors when they consider inviting candidates for applicants. I mean, they have 5,000 or I don't know how many thousands of applications that programs actually get when, come that September 15th. And they can't call each and everyone for an interview. So programs set their own filters. So based on the ranking of that particular program, whether you're applying for a university top-notch, Johns Hopkins or other top-notch programs at the UCSF, UCLA, or Stanford, or whether you're, going to a small community program, every program, they have their own set filters that they design so that they can filter out candidates who they do not think are going to make it and actually invite candidates based on certain filters. And your step 1 score might be a filter. Your CK score might be a filter. If you've had attempts or red flags, that might be a filter. If you've had a gap, that might be a filter. So the next thing that the programs do consider is basically what have you done since your year of graduation? How long ago did you graduate? What did you do in the interim to fill that gap? So that counts a lot as well. Now, I know not all IMGs have, a year of graduation of 1 or 2 years from the time of their application, but try and make use of that gap if you have one. Try and show the program, give them a very decent justification of what you have done during that time to make yourself a better applicant. So as you can see on this slide, your scores, your LORs, your personal statement, and then comes your grades and required clerkship. Yes, they are important. They look at your medical school transcripts. But I think that's more for the US graduates rather than for the IMGs. Now, wherein overall, this slide is for the entire group of applicants, not just IMGs or AMGs here. And then, how committed you are to the specialty. Did you do observerships? Did you do electives? Did you do, an externship in that particular field that you are interested in is what actually matters as well. So the rest, so based on this, your scores, your LORs, your personal statements, your experience so far, any attempts that you have had, any gaps on your CV, how best you can actually justify those. These are the most important things. Now, if you've worked in a program, if they know you, that helps a lot. But obviously, if you've worked in a program, you did an elective or an observership, and you didn't really show any interest, you didn't really show professionalism, now that's going to work against you. Although you might have a line on your CV saying that, oh, I've done this observership, this elective at so-and-so place. If you don't use it the right way, it can backfire. So make sure that, whatever you do, you have that professional attitude and follow ethics and principles. All right, I think that is what I have got to say with regards to the factors that fetch interviews for candidates. One last but not the least important thing to mention is that if you do have contacts in a particular program, this is the time to try and approach them. Don't bug them, don't annoy them, don't keep texting or calling them every day. But, have a decent sort of rapport. Try and see if your friends, your seniors, your colleagues might be able to fetch an interview. Now, if you've got big red flags, they may not be able to do much. But if you have a good application, they can, or a borderline application, I'm sure they can, put in a word to fetch you that interview if you are on par with, like, say, suppose 1,000 other applicants on the same category as Dr. Fanala said. Now, don't bug them, don't annoy them though, because that can really, again, go against you. They can only help to a certain extent. They can fetch you an interview. They won't be able to help you get ranked to match in their program. That's the key. Okay, don't assume, oh, I've got a contact, so I'm just going to, match in this program anyway. I'm not really going to put in a lot of time or effort to do this, because that won't work that way. The ranking is decided on several panel and faculty members, not just one person that you might have, met 5 years ago on one or two different occasions. All right. I think that is what I have to say at this point. I'll be happy to actually pitch in and answer any questions at the end if you have.
Yeah, thank you, Shailaja. So before we move on, Sridevi, quickly, anything from your experience you want to add in general? What other factors that programs may be considering? And Chintav, I'll come to you as well. So Sridevi, anything that you want to add?
I believe Shailaja very comprehensively covered all the points, so I'm just happy to move into my segment at this point.
Okay. Very quickly, Chintav, you interviewed at some of the AMG heavy programs, and so anything different, anything that stands out for you?
Well, something I would say is that while we were talking, Shailaja was talking about the contacts and everything, contact is something that can fetch you an interview, but from my experience, a contact gets you an interview because the person on the other side doesn't want to spoil the relations he has with the other doctor. So make sure, like, if you aren't super 100% sure that you're going to match into that program because you have a contact, doesn't mean, because program director, all he's doing is trying to please the doctor on the other side by giving an interview. So don't take it for granted that you have a contact in the program, so you're going to match. Well, at the end of the day, your interview performance is going to be way more important than a contact in the program. And something, since I've interviewed at 2 or 3 programs that are very predominantly AMG programs, ANGs are pretty confident at what they do. They literally come in the interview as if like they are the boss, and we are kind of the people who goes in a little bit of reserved in the sense that we're there because we don't know what to expect. So something what I have seen is that the American graduates have a lot of confidence, and that is something what we can incorporate as foreign medical graduates into our thing, is to be more confident when you go to the program and, you know, just not sit there and think about what you're going to be asked. Start talking around. Like when you go to the interview season and go to the places to interview, you'll see how American graduates kind of just joke around as if they are just there for a party, you know. So that is something I would say would be a good thing to incorporate, is be confident, don't be reserved and, you know, introverted, something like that.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chintas. So now let's move on to the other section, which is how do the programs in general, so we're not talking any specific program. So in general, what do they assess? Do they have a scorecard? Do they have a checklist? How do they do it, right? So is it a committee? So Sridevi, do you want to talk about it in general? How do you see programs assessing candidates?
Right, absolutely. So I'm given a very nice segue into my segment by Shailaja, Chinta, Dr. Panala, and Pavan, so thank you for that. So most programs do have a certain protocol for assessing candidates. It's not all as subjective as we like to imagine. There is a huge chunk of objectivity there. So every program has a checklist. Every program has a point system, and then after the point system is made, usually a committee consisting of the program director, associate program directors, and the chief residents huddle together and then place their final rank list. So just going from during the time of interview. Now, as Shailaja mentioned, now you guys know all the factors which programs take into account to invite you for interview. Now, if I just talk about it, that will be like the non-modifiable part of your application until at that point. You've done all your steps, you've done all your personal statements, your letters, and you can't do anything about them now. So those are the non-modifiable parts which have already fetched you a score. Now comes the modifiable part, which is entirely upon you. The ball is in your court about how you perform during interviews. And like Chinta mentioned, a huge chunk of it is confidence and interpersonal interaction. Like when a bunch of, say, 10, 12 applicants come in and sit for an interview, you will always notice that there are chief residents there are residents there, or interns there who are actually sent to mingle with the applicants. And they're actually on the lookout for how you guys behave, how you guys interact with each other, how you interact with others of the program. Like, you know, do you jump at the program coordinator because she didn't answer your email? Did you harass her because you were late and she didn't answer your email? If you became late, that was your problem, not her problem in not responding to you. We've seen a lot of people do a lot of weird things, and these actually stand out. So when we are actually interacting with candidates for an entire day of interview, we are actually looking out for the people who are the most forthcoming, people who are the most comfortable around each other, and people who take initiative to go ahead and meet others and say hi and how are you doing, and like Chinta mentioned, how comfortable they are in that scenario. If you sit back quietly into one corner, all tensed and not trying to mingle with others, it's really not a good sign, because ultimately at the end of the day, we are looking for team players for a team which you can, which you want to hire for being a team in the ICU, for being a team on night floor. So you want people who are interactive, communicative. So that is a really big deal. So once your interview day is done, usually these residents and chief residents huddle together and they kind of go through all the candidates by their faces, even if people don't remember their names. And they were like, do you remember any red flags about this guy? Do you remember any red flags or any good points about this guy? And these sort of discussions do happen. Mind you, everything that you do is being watched, especially if someone is being obnoxious by acting around, oh, what is your score? What is your score? How come you got interviewed at this program and I didn't, even though my score is this much? The inherent competitiveness and probably insecurity should not come out on your interview day. You can do that outside. You can fake that outside of the interview day, but do not take that as a platform to ask other residents where they interviewed at, make a mental note and try to reach out for that program, and that's a huge red flag. Asking programs about, excessively about their weaknesses, like, do you pay this much? How do you think residents survive? That's not a good way to go about asking about your salary. In fact, you can ask your residents, like, what do you guys do in your free time? What do you guys go out for? So that's a different way of asking what you do with free time and if you get free time, rather than being very forthright, oh, does the program give you any free time? So all these antagonistic approaches are going to be seen by residents and chief residents, and they will remember you if you come across that way. So how you carry yourself has a very big deal in how you're assessed post-interview. Now, how you perform during interview matters a lot. Usually at most programs, you have interviews with the program director, another faculty, and probably another faculty more. So it's always a few faculty. So they assess on the basis of how you answer questions, how exactly forthcoming you are, how much of an open and engaging and communicative manner you are. And they do score you objectively on all these parameters. And at the end of the day, when every hurdle is done, all your points are going to be added up and made into a composite score. So it is this composite score that ultimately decides on how you're being ranked. Like I mentioned before, the non-modifiable part of your application has already fetched you scores. Your step 1, step 2, the strength of your personal statement, the strength of your letters, they already fetched you a score. The rest of your score is dependent on how well you performed in interviews and the feedback from chief residents and residents as to how you came across that day. And once that final composite score is obtained, that's when you're ranked in the program after the final hurdle. So this is like a long overview of how candidates are assessed post-interview. Pawan?
Okay, thank you. Shailaja, anything that you've seen different, in terms of scorecards, checklists, etc., before we move on, in terms of the assessment? I think you're muted, Shailaja. I think you got muted.
Sorry, yeah. So, Sridevi said, I think your interview can actually make the deal or break the deal. So all the hard work you've done in the last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years is going to fetch you an interview, but it's not actually going to give you a residency spot. People who are not familiar with the US system feel that I've got 270, 260 in my step 1 or MPK, so I'm good. I'm going to actually get into a residency program. And then sometimes they can actually become overconfident. But that is not the case. Your 260 and 270 on the interview is going to fetch you, on the exam is going to fetch you an interview, but it's not actually going to give you a residency seat. Now, if you actually go with an overconfident and arrogant attitude because you've done so well in your exam, that will surely work against you. But at the same time, don't actually be underconfident. You've got to have that right balance so that you don't cross your line, and it's a very fine line that you've got to walk on during the interview season. Do not actually create any, this is the best time where you can actually explain your red flag. So maybe you've had a gap. You are fortunate enough to have worked in a particular program, made some contact, got an interview. At this point, try and make the best use of the opportunity to justify your gap so that you're going on to the other side where you're going to actually be ranked rather than, going on the opposite side where you probably have been invited for an interview just because of a courtesy call given the fact that you have a contact there, but actually you've not done really the best that you can to cross this line and go to the other side where you can be ranked rather than, you're just like staying on this end. So this is the best you have to prove yourself, to show that you're very reliable, proactive, but at the same time, you kind of know your limits so you don't cross the board. And interaction with not just the residents, not just the faculty. Make sure you talk to your colleagues who are competing with you on that day in the interview, okay? So if you just interact with residents in the program or faculty in the program and ignore people who are in the same shoes around you as you are on the day, that again works against you. Okay, don't sort of think that they are your competitors, so you're not obligated to talk to them, or you don't want to talk to them, or you don't want to give out information. That is again a black mark. Okay, that's all I have to add so far now.
Thank you. And so now let's move on into the actual preparation, and we'll talk about how we also help. But let me bring in Chintav, and then move to others as well. So Chintav, in general, what do you recommend as they start the interview preparation? What should be the strategies? How should they start this preparation?
Yeah, so actually what I believe is your interview preparation starts the day you start preparing your personal statements and CV. Sometimes people think that, I'm just going to make a personal statement and CV and then forget about it. Well, that's not true. The day you start making that personal statement and CV, you need to know everything inside out in your personal statement and in your CV. You don't want to go on an interview day thinking that, oh, they're going to ask me, how are you doing today? And just the normal questions. You got to know. So the most important thing, I would say the first thing, since you all are at the phase right now where you're doing your CV, personal statement, are in the process of, uploading it for your ERAS, just make sure that you know everything inside out about your personal statement. Even if you have lied, if you have written some bullshit, whatever, just make sure you know it so that on an interview day, if someone wants to ask you something about your CV, if you start blabbering around and you start doing, I don't know, you just start and stop there, they'll know that you don't know your CV and personal statement inside out. So that is something I would do. Once you're done and you know your PS and CV inside out, the best way to prepare is practice, practice, practice. There's nothing better than practicing for an interview with someone who can sit in front of you and ask you the questions. And it could be anyone. It could be your friend. It could be your significant other. It could be your mom. It could be your dad. But something what the IMG lack as compared to the American graduate is the interview skills. Because back in our countries where we come from, everything is based on scores. There's nothing like an interview system where you actually go in and talk to the program director and the doctors. So that is something that we totally lack. And American graduates, like right after they get out of high school, they start interviewing to get into the college, then getting into the medical school. So they are really good at interview skills, and that is something where we need to bridge the gap and learn how exactly the interview skill works. And as Pawan said, we also help you with preparing for the interviews too, like mock interviews, and then we give you some standardized answers to how to answer if you come up with a particular question. But yes, my whole advice as a resident and as someone who did all this last year would be to make sure you know your CV and personal statement inside out, and then practice your interview skills, because at the end of the day, you want to sit in front of a program director and sound confident and put your point forward in a way where he thinks like, oh, okay, I think this guy is the real deal, and that's what we are here for.
Right. Thank you, Chintav. And for some reason, my camera, is acting funny. But let me move on for some of the interesting pieces. So, Shailaja, starting with you, what are some of the very important questions? Now, Chintav has said, start with PS and CV. But in your opinion, what type of questions? A couple of important questions that everyone should really nail down even before entering or starting. So what are those 2 or 3 questions? And then I'll go around and get it from everyone. So, if they had to select top 2 or 3 questions, which questions do you think they should prepare? Not a whole list, but the top 2, 3.
Sure. So there are specialty-specific questions, but every interview usually starts off with, okay, tell me about yourself. So they would want to get you to warm up. So they're going to say, hi, hello, I'm so-and-so. how, when did you reach here or where did you come from? So just generally the first 1 or 2 minutes is to just warm you up so that, and make you feel comfortable so that you are not nervous and, stressing out and sweating in front of them. Then the most common thing that they're going to ask you is, tell me a bit about yourself. And this is the best time you can actually try in a very short period of time, maybe a minute or two at the max. Give them a background, a gist or an overview of your, say, your academics, your achievements so far, just as a personality as you are, what type of person you are. And I'm sure that Pawan over the course of the season will actually give you an idea of, how long you need to spend on this question and what are the key things to cover. But the first question will be, tell me a bit about yourself. And then if you've done anything like a home country residency, they might ask you about that. Your strengths and weaknesses, is something that you need to be prepared to answer. So have like maybe 5 strengths, and then you might talk about 3 of your strengths. They might ask you 3 strengths. They might ask you 2 strengths. But make sure you certainly have an answer to that question. And more importantly, your weakness, because they want to see, do you have any weaknesses? Do you realize or recognize that everyone has weaknesses? So do you have one? What is it? And how bad it can be? What have you done to actually try and work on it? Or what are you doing to work on it? So strengths and weaknesses, tell me about yourself, your background so far if you have done a home country residency, your strengths and weaknesses. Why should they give you this thought when compared to 20 other people who are being interviewed that day, or 2,000, I don't know how many ever applicants they invite for the interviews during the season? Why should you be that candidate that they are going to rank you high and give you a spot? I think these are some of the questions that every program expects. And I can cover more questions, but I think I'll, hold on and see what my colleagues have actually on the panel got to add on. I'm sure they've been through a few and they have a lot more to cover as well.
Yep, Sridevi, on to you. What other questions, or what are your top 3 or 4 questions that you expect everyone to be prepared? I think you are muted. Sridevi, I think you are muted.
Yes, I was. Yeah, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yes, so before we go on to the 3 questions, I just want to touch base on exactly what Shailaja covered. Tell me about yourself is so very, very important. I just want to add one point there. When you're talking about yourself, do not make tell me about yourself entirely about your USMLE journey or your path to residency. That's a common mistake everyone makes, thinking that that is what the interviewer wants to hear. But no, all of that information is there on your CV. Your tell me about yourself is not a rehash of your residency journey. They want to know about you. That's like who you are in academically, who you are otherwise, like where you grew up, where you did your schooling, did anything stand out, and your path, and then what you do outside of work or academic life. Please make sure you include that in tell me about yourself and not just go on about, oh, I'm from this in this country, I came here and I did this elective in this place, it was so amazing, I got these opportunities, and just going on about your electives and observerships and externships and then concluding. That should not be how tell me about yourself is. It's a common mistake everyone makes. I just wanted to touch base on that. Moving on to other questions, one big question always they ask you is, why did you want to leave your home country and come to the US? Now it's always a balance that you have to strike. You should always talk about how much of a good training you got in your home country. Make sure you don't bash your home country or badmouth it, saying that, oh my God, opportunities are less, and just downplay the whole thing. And make sure you don't praise the training system in the United States too, because once you do that, they know that you are bluffing or trying to appease them. So always strike a balance between, yes, you did have good training, but for this particular reason, I believe that I will get a similar or a higher amount of training here, and I believe that I will get research opportunities, and you can practice in different ways in the United States, and that's why you want to explore working here. That would be a safe answer, but just make sure to not, badmouth your home country or whatever. The other question they often ask you is, why this program? Why us? Now, I know that a lot of you will end up with a lot of interviews, and sometimes you have interviews back to back. You'll be traveling from one city to another, perhaps to a program that you are not that interested in. You may not do your diligent homework before you go, but I encourage you, even while you're in transit, make sure you go through everything that the program has on their website or what you know by talking to others, because your answer there has to be as specific as possible. Why do you want to come to this program? Giving generic answers, again, is not that good of a, a good flag. What they want to hear is your specific reason, because trust me, like Cynthia mentioned, AMGs, when they go to a program, they have a specific agenda, like why they want to come to this program. So you need to tell them, yes, I like this aspect about this program. I went through the website. I found that there's a lot of academic opportunities here. The opportunity to do elective at this particular place is what attracted me here. The geographical proximity to such and such a place. Be as specific as possible and not give generic answers like, oh, it has a good reputation. It has good academic training. So in all your answers, try to back up as much as possible. Do your research even if you're going to your least interested program, so that you have a well-rounded specific answer when they ask you, why do you want to come here? So to continue on to what Shailaja mentioned, my other questions would be, why did you decide to train in the US? Why do you want to come to our program? And the same, like she mentioned, why should we hire you? These are common questions that you may have to field.
Okay. Thank you, Sridevi. Chinta, on to you. What other questions have you seen? Or do you expect students, the top 2 or 3?
My questions were exactly the same as Sridevi just literally mentioned, but I think I have 2 more that I can add up there. So I think one of the questions that everyone kind of tends to negate is your hobbies. That is something really important, because what I feel is some interviews can literally just be your hobby. So when you write something in your hobbies in your CV, where you mention like, you have this love for painting, or you have, you love to cook, or you love to dance, whatnot, make sure you at least can talk about 2 or 3 minutes or up to like 5 minutes on your hobby, because last year everyone, like, from what I know, there was a lot of interviews where they literally asked everything about the or the hobby, and one of the person was even made to dance because dancing was her hobby, and this happened in an interview, and Pawan knows about it, and I don't think that guy is on our panel where it happened. So that is something. So that is something I want you to all keep in mind. Is anything you can expect anything on an interview day. So that is something which I would keep in mind and focus there. And something else, or one more question where I would concentrate would be, to answer if a program director asks you, or Sridevi mentioned, why this program or something like that. So you need to make sure that, if you're interviewing at a university program, you tailor your answer to a university program. You can't just like, if you want to do a fellowship and then that's what you say at a university program. But if you're interviewing at a community program, you don't want to say that. You want to tailor your answer to a community program. Though at the end of the day, your target is to do a fellowship, I don't want you to say that I want to do a fellowship at a community program, because a community program wants you to stay there and practice as a internist, hospitalist, or a primary care doctor. So that is something which you need to tailor your answers accordingly, and make sure that if it's a university interview or a community program interview, that is something important that I would add there. And I think that's about it. Those are the few questions you really need to work on, whatever we all kind of went over.
Thank you, Chinta. Rahul, anything that you wanted to add in terms of any 1 or 2 top questions?
I think Sridevi, Chinta, and Shailaja covered most of it. what I'll tell you from a perspective of, I guess more experience and more assessment is, when you walk into an interview room, right, these people have interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. So the most experienced interviewers tend to make an assessment of an individual within the first maybe 2 to 3 minutes. It doesn't require more than that to really sort of put person in a bucket of, okay, this is where this person fits, and use the rest of the time to either validate or refute that assessment. And what you can do, one of the things that we haven't talked about, but which is very, very critical, are two things. One is, I hear a beeping sound. I hope that everybody can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. I think someone is trying to call on one of the phones, but that's fine.
Okay. And this is not necessarily particular to interviews, but this is relevant to, you're at a stage in your life or career and everything, but this will hold remember, for your entire career. Now, how you dress is actually quite important. And how you it doesn't have to be fancy, but you have to look extremely professional when you walk in. And so the person across has to look at you and say, okay, I can take this person to be a physician in my program, right? So how you dress for an interview, and then how you speak, what your mannerisms are, how I think everybody was talking about this before, but what I call the intangibles of how you greet people, whether you're a jerk or not, whether you're polite, whether you say please and thank you, and the simple stuff, that goes a long way. So think about it. A lot of people don't really pay that much attention to how you show up, because you remember everything that you've done is going to be sort of evaluated in that 20 minutes. So you got to look your sharpest, you got to look the smartest, and you really have to then live up to that sort of prototype that you're trying to sell. Essentially, you're trying to sell yourself in 20 minutes. So think about it that way. So, okay. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Rahul. So just as we move on to the questions. Yep.
Just one more. Since Dr. Panala was mentioning about, interview and going in there, something that we all guys need to work upon, and I had to really work upon hard, is our posture when we sit. That is something everyone needs to kind of take from today's webinar, is learn how to sit in a chair facing someone. And, we tend to have a tendency where we kind of don't look eye to eye, or, look at the person's eye and we just look down. That is something which is not good. So that is something I would also like to mention here, is make sure you have a correct posture when you sit in front of a program director. Be confident. Don't bend your back or anything. Sit straight. Look into his eyes and say that, you know what, you have invited me. I'm confident, and I'm going to answer all your questions. And that would go a long way in making sure that your interview feels really great.
All right. Thank you, Chintan.
Yep. One good way for anyone who does to practice is always in front of a mirror. Because in front of a mirror, you can see exactly how you come across to the other person. So once you have your answers in your head, just step up to a mirror, pretend that you're answering, and then you can see yourself how you come across. And I believe that's a good way for anyone to start off if you're not comfortable.
Okay. We have a couple of minutes left. So before we open up for questions, whatever Chintan said or Rahul or anyone, we do have, as you all know, interview preparation that will be starting in September. It includes classes on everything: behavioral questions, medical questions, posture, eye contact, dress, mock interviews, one-on-one coaching. So do look us up on our website. Everything is listed. Not going to, spend too much time there, but it's all on the screen here. So look us up or, call us. And let me now, open up for questions. I know we're all very busy, so I don't want to take too much time of the panelists, but any quick questions you can type and we'll try to answer.
Right. While we are waiting for people to type, Pawan, I have a couple of points to add. So also prepare for why do you want to, pursue this particular specialty, just like why this program, why this specialty, which is one of the very common questions. The second thing to add on is most programs, or at least some programs, have pre-interview dinners. Now, if you actually have the opportunity, try and make it to those dinners. They are slightly more casual than the actual day of the interview. And you get to warm up with a few residents or the faculty or whoever is going to attend those dinners. Now, some of the dinners could happen at a restaurant, a pub or wherever. We actually have a couple of programs that do dinners at faculty's residences. And my program does pre-interview dinners at the residence of a faculty member, and that kind of alternates. So these pre-interview dinners are again one of a good opportunity to try and interact with people in a slightly more casual environment, not very formal, but that doesn't mean go, and just joke around and have alcohol and do whatever. That doesn't mean that. It's professional. It's an opportunity for guys to go there and interact with other members.
And keep alcohol.
Yeah, and one more thing on a slightly different note is these interviews are usually a one-on-one interviews. There's very rarely you come across a panel interview where you have 5 or 6 people sitting in one room at the same table and grilling you with questions. Most of the internal medicine interviews are generally, you have 2 or 3 or 4 different people. It's anywhere between 2 and 5 people. And you see them on a one-on-one basis. So you go to the first interview, you all wait in a waiting area. You get called by the program coordinators. Okay, you are ready for an interview with this person. It's going to be 10 minutes or whatever, or 15 minutes. You go into that person's chamber, that faculty member. You get asked a few sets of questions, a particular set of questions. Then you come out back to the waiting area, and then you get directed to the next interviewer who is going to interview you for the next 10 minutes or so. And they are trying to actually be very friendly, try and put you at ease, because they do this every day. They do this every year. So they know how uncomfortable people can be, and they try and make you comfortable. They're not trying to sort of make sure that you don't mash. They are trying to put you at ease, so and assess you as a person. All your achievements so far have been on your CV. They can go through the CV and, your scores, your achievements so far. But it's kind of an interaction. They're trying to get to know you as a person and see if you can be the right fit for their program. So try and sort of make the best of what you can, stay relaxed. One last thing, make sure you start preparing for your behavioral questions from now on, because every experience is unique to you. As faculty, we can help tailor those experiences. For example, tell me about a mistake you have done or mistake you have come across and how did you actually correct it. I or Sridevi or Dr. Phanala or Dr. Pawan can't come up with an answer, a unique answer for each and every student in the group. Everyone has their own experiences. So try and use, from now on, set a time aside to actually think about those experiences you have had and which one would suit to which particular behavioral question. And start writing down so that when you have your interview sessions with our faculty, we can help you tailor and give you an idea of how you can actually portray that answer rather than actually cooking up an answer for you. Okay?
Thank you, Shailaja. In fact, we've been answering a lot of questions on the chat. So I think we are already over the hour. So I would like to thank all our panelists And if you have more questions, I will type in the email where you can send us those questions, or on our Facebook page. So let me type that, either email. So we'll check this email, or, you can go to Facebook page and, so Facebook page is something we definitely will check very frequently, multiple times a day. So use the Facebook page to ask questions, or our email. And all the best to you. Look us up, and we'll be starting our interview prep, in a week or so. So thank you, everyone. Sridevi, Shailaja, Chinta, Rahul. Appreciate your time.